Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Leah Simon, and this is my colleague Shayna French. And today our topic is accommodation and COVID-19. So one question that we're getting a lot from clients right now is, what happens when things return to some state of normalcy and employers start thinking about returning their employees to the workplace? Are employers obligated if an employee requests to remain working from home to allow that employee to continue to work from home, or can employers require employees to return to the workplace? Shayna?
I agree, Leah. It's a question we are being asked constantly, and I'm sure it will remain top of mind for employers in the coming months. In short, there's no right to remain at home unless there's a term in the employment agreement or workplace policy that provides otherwise. The expectation is employees will return to the workplace. Just because that is the extraordinary arrangement that was made during the pandemic doesn't set a precedent tying an employer's hands. Now, if an employee has a human rights related reason, such as a disability or a family status issue that prevents them from being able to return to the physical workspace, an employer will have a duty to accommodate the restriction to the point of undue hardship, but this doesn't automatically translate into a right to work from home as the first option. The employer is entitled to review the restrictions imposed by the employee's condition and determine what reasonable accommodation looks like. And that, of course, means they'll have the right to obtain appropriate information to the circumstance, and we encourage employers not to shy away from that dialogue with the employees. An appropriate accommodation, if supported, could include a continued role in the office, but with modifications made to the role, or the physical environment to accommodate the employee. It may also involve a change in schedule, but that's something that comes out of the process. So, Leah, a question for you. Speaking of how life will look once we get COVID under control, and public health measures such as masking and physical distancing are no longer required, how should an employer respond to an employee who claims they can't return to work because they have anxiety about being in such close proximity to others, even after COVID-19 has subsided?
So I think the starting point is to remember that anxiety and feelings of anxiety in and of themselves are not a disability that will trigger an employer's duty to accommodate under the Human Rights Code. Certainly, anxiety can be a symptom of a diagnosed mental health condition that would trigger those obligations. But if it's just anxiety that we're all feeling right now and we're feeling in a heightened way because of the world that we're living in, it doesn't necessarily mean that an employee is going to have a disability that's going to trigger those obligations. So the first step is to really get that medical information so that you can determine whether there's a disability that exists, and if so, what the nature of the restrictions are, so you can determine what appropriate accommodation will look like. Now, when we're dealing with mental health conditions, sometimes getting the medical information is not so straightforward. You're not going to be just sending that regular FAF form to the doctor, because that's not going to get you the information that you need. So we regularly help clients to tailor their requests to the doctor to ensure that we're asking the right questions to get the information that we need to determine whether that disability exists, and if so, what the restrictions are. Sometimes that's very helpful, and sometimes what you get back is not that helpful and you're not getting the information that you need, and you might need to look at other strategies. So for example, you might need to engage a third-party medical provider to review the employee's information and help you make that determination about whether there is a disability. So with that, let's look at September and what's going on with the school situation. So of course, none of us know whether in September kids are going to be back in school full-time in person, or whether there's still going to be some combination of remote learning in school. But let's assume, hopefully, that kids are back in school. What happens, how should an employer respond if they have an employee that prefers to keep their children home in a remote working arrangement? Does the employer then have an obligation to accommodate that preference with allowing the employee to work from home or take a leave of absence?
Even in the current circumstance, an employee isn't automatically entitled to a work from home arrangement just because they have a child at home. So that's my starting point. They're only entitled if the child's unable to attend school, so if the school's closed, or the child has to attend remotely for medical reasons, and there are no other supports available at home to care for the child during the workday. Currently, an employee is entitled to IDEL, which is an unpaid leave under the ESA for any time off for childcare reasons. And whether that's extended into the fall remains to be seen. As you said, we don't know what September is going to look like, but employers are well advised to start shaping expectations in as far in advance as possible, as far in advance of September as possible, to avoid an employee saying they didn't realize that they wouldn't be able to continue to work at home. So, for example, they didn't arrange before or after school care for their child. So, Leah, I know we're running out of time. It's the last question for the day. What are the top 3 recommendations to an organization responding to a request for accommodation?
So I think the first one is the same in the COVID context as it is in the regular context. You need to get that medical information. You need to satisfy yourself that a disability exists such that your code obligations are triggered, and you need to get enough information to know what the employee's restrictions are so that you as the employer can implement an appropriate accommodation. And remember that it's the employer's job to determine what the appropriate accommodation is, not the employee's. So in the context of COVID-19, the default position is not necessarily going to be accommodating the employee with a work from home arrangement. There may be other options available to the employer depending on what the employee's restrictions are. And then finally, remember that there are resources available to you. So you can reach out to external counsel to help you get the medical information if you're having trouble getting it from the employee. And also to help you review the information that you get and brainstorm about different accommodation options that might be available.
Thank you, Leah. That is all the time we have for today. We're looking forward to seeing everyone on April 22nd at the National Conference and answering some more questions then. Take care.